So it's my pleasure to introduce this third session. And here, why do I say it's my pleasure? It's because the three women and scientists who are going to present this session are really role models who are engaged into action, and they are doing lots of things, many things, to change the world as it is. So you're going to see, first of all, Professor Ravinder Kaur from IIT New Delhi, who is going to explain to us all her action she did for the inclusion of gender and caste, doing affirmative action in her institute. Then we're going to have Sepinut Azimi Rashti, who will present how she's using AI to understand the gender roles in pop culture and how it influences the way we are behaving and how maybe we can change the future generation if we change that. And the last one will be Anna Zielinska, Professor Anna Zielinska from the University of Lorraine, who is a philosopher and studying epistemology, and who will understand, try make us understand the roots of the science and the people who are doing science, and how this could help for our quest of truth and requirement for diversity. So first of all, it's my pleasure to introduce Ravinder Kaur, because first of all, she's my friend. So I'm very honored that she's here today. She's Professor Emerita at the Indian Institute of Delhi's Department of Humanity and Social Sciences. And she's been teaching there since 1996. She's trained in sociology and social anthropology, and she has spent over 2 decades on research and advocacy related to gender. So she was a co-founder of the first convener of IIT Delhi's gender unit, and she was chosen to lead a major initiative in the Department of the Science and Technology, which is the GATI, the Gender Advancement for Transforming Institution. And she's going to present for us today the results they had through the study they did at her institute. So please give a warm welcome to Professor Ravinder Kaur.
My thanks to the organizers and to Violetta especially for inviting me to take part in this very exciting workshop. I think I've already learned a lot since the morning, and I look forward to the remaining sessions and the speakers as well. Just a slight correction, Violetta. I will not be speaking on the actions that we have done at IIT Delhi, the gender unit, etc., and the gender self-assessment of IIT Delhi that I did. That's a whole different work. I'm going to talk today, taking a cue from the title of your symposium, The Power of Inclusion. I'm going to talk about 2 sorts of affirmative actions: gender affirmative action and caste affirmative action, in order to see what are the responses of the students and what are the kinds of biases and stereotypes that still involve affirmative action. So the point here is that one can bring in what we call numerical inclusion. The question that I'm really asking is, does that numerical inclusion result in substantive inclusion of the people who are beneficiaries or who take advantage of affirmative action, which is much needed? I think it has been discussed, whether it's quotas or whether it's other types. When you see big gaps in representation, I think it becomes the responsibility of universities, of society, of academia, everybody to address those gaps. So my presentation is titled The Necessity and Difficulties of Inclusion, and I hope to show both the sides from ethnographic work, studies that we have been doing among students, of our own students, and illustrate, what are still the barriers and the roadblocks to changing stereotypes, biases, and how far along the way we have gone or not gone. Just to say a few words about the gender scenario in higher education in India, I removed those graphs because there was too many slides, but there has been substantive progress in enrollment of women in higher education in India, closing the gender gap, in fact. And when you look at science and technology, we find that more than half of the students in the sciences are women, and a little less are men. So there is no gender gap there. But when we look at technology and when we look at engineering and technology, there is a big gender gap. So they are about 28%. And I'm going to talk about the IITs, which are a special case, and I will soon highlight why we need to look at institutions like the IITs. So just to speak a little bit about the IITs, but because not everybody might be familiar with them, even if the IITs think that they are globally very well known, they are important actually because they produce global and national leaders and role models in research, academia, innovation, and business. Interestingly, they also represent the middle class's dream of social reality, of social mobility. So, you would have heard that many Indian parents feel that their children should be doctors and engineers. Preferably, the daughter should be a doctor and the son should be an engineer. So we already see some gender binaries there. And also, over 1 million students, I think it was 1.5 million in the recent exam, two-tiered, first part of the two-tiered exam that we had, who sit for the exam each year with an acceptance rate of generally below 5%. It was 1.5 in the last year's exam. So you can see how highly competitive this particular exam is. And it plays on the anxieties of the middle class, the people wishing to climb into the middle class, and people generally wanting to join what is called professional education because it is what is considered more lucrative than the humanities and the social sciences. We see gender gaps also in law, in management. So whenever you look at an academic field that has been professionalized, you find that the gender gaps will be more stark. The very tough preparation and competition. Some of you might have read about it. 2 years of coaching in remote places that people send their children to, where they have no social life for 2 years. They don't have a normal schooling life for 2 years. It results in high anxiety and sharpened biases against affirmative action. So just to quickly switch, my story is going to be mostly about gender affirmative action, but there is an intersectionality there because the gender affirmative action is also distributed caste-wise. So there are women who will be sharing both identities, and I will be talking about, both sets of girls. So just to give you a kind of an anecdotal understanding of the IITs, they started in the 1960s and the original 5, and was set up between 1960 and 1970. I think IIT Delhi was set up in 1961, and maybe there were 0 girls in the flagship BTech degree that the IITs are proud of. So when we switched to 2016-17 at IIT Delhi, we find that there were 11% girls. So if you look at it, it actually took a little over half a century to get to the number of 11%. Now, it was expected that there will be a normal evolution and that their women will join, as more people know about it and more women enter science and technology. But obviously, this glacial pace at which the percentage of women has increased has not taken us anywhere. And what the message that we are getting, and this is about elite engineering institutions, is that it excludes women. So, which is why I will quickly shift to, the affirmative action scheme that I'm going to be focusing on for the most part of my presentation. This dismal pace of gender inclusion made affirmative action necessary. So it was in the 2016 It was in 2016 that a committee, high-level committee, was set up by the IITs, spearheaded by a male professor who was gender sensitive, and which that then, kind of came up with this affirmative action scheme. It's called the supernumerary seat scheme, which is a bit of a mouthful. So either you can think of it as SSS or you can think of it simply as the scheme, because I'm going to be referring to it frequently. We started implementing it in all the IITs from 2018 onwards. And the goal was to ensure 20% female students in the BTech degree at every IIT. It was meant to be phased out after that, but all these things take a life of their own, and most institutions are continuing with the scheme. So female-only supernumerary seats were created, which were not to affect the existing available seats. Hence, the algorithm says that there is no unfairness to males. So these are extra seats, to bring up the number in each and every IIT and each and every department of every IIT to 20%. So it's a very well, fairly conceptualized way of bringing in gender affirmative action. The scheme also ensures that the extra seats are distributed across all disadvantaged castes and categories. And female students are first admitted into female-only seats, irrespective of their rank in the exam. So there is a pool of female-only seats and there is a pool of gender-neutral seats. All women who are in the female list are first admitted to the female-only seats. This creates a bit of a problem, which I will allude to later, not right now. In case, just to, for the benefit of people who might not be aware of India's complex and rigid caste structure, there is caste-based affirmative action, and also the intersectional identities that I mentioned. So there are fixed quotas in higher education for the following caste. Some of them you might recognize earlier were called Dalit castes, the SCs, the scheduled tribes, OBCs. It translates to other backward classes, but it's actually castes, and the economically weaker sections among upper castes and persons with disabilities. So all these reservations in fixed quotas are there in Indian higher education. And so approximately 2/3 of the students who are coming into higher education are from these backgrounds. And so in a way, it has substantially improved the diversity of the higher education institutions much, much better than it used to be. Female-only seats created are not a fixed quota, unlike the caste quotas. So that's another important difference that the people who created or envisioned the scheme make, because in their minds, they wanted to distinguish it from a quota and not have the kind of associations people have with quota, stereotypical associations of people not as suited to STEM or not as brilliant, as we were learning in the previous presentations. And the idea is that, the numbers should reach up to 20%. Hence, the difference and are not meant to definitely be there all the time in a definite proportion. So what has taken place after the introduction of this scheme? Now, this is really very, very interesting, because you will see that the scheme has doubled the number of undergraduate STEM women on campus. And this has happened quick, in the shortest time. So 2018 is when the scheme comes in, and by 2021 or 2020, you already have 20%. And for us, Divya and I who teach there, we can already see the very visible difference in our classrooms, on campus. I mean, both of us have taught classes of over 100 students where you did not have a single girl. And that is no longer the case in the IIT classrooms. You also see the power of inclusion here. girls football team has just been formed, and it's certainly something that is made possible by increased numbers. I'm told that a girls cricket team is in the offing now. So what this tells us, I mean, the girls have documented their struggles of playing sports on the IIT campus. It was not a level playing field at all for them. And they hesitated to go to the sports grounds because they were so male dominated and they were not comfortable being there. So now it's a changing scenario, at least in this respect, that we can see. Women with intersectional identities also catch up too, and this is even more heartening because what we are looking at is convergence within among social groups, which means that further diversity is being added to the campus. So earlier, males from disadvantaged categories were getting the benefit of affirmative action, but with this scheme, more and more girls are also getting the benefit of affirmative action, which increases the overall diversity on campus. So what I do in this presentation is to, as I said, present some findings from an ethnographic study of students entering after the initiation of the scheme. And I also present some findings from previous and ongoing quantitative research on student performance pre and post introduction of the scheme. And a lot of what I'm going to say speaks to my preceding presentation and some of the earlier presentations that we had resonates with them. So what's interesting here? Female students overperforming but undervalued. Women admitted after supernumerary scheme entered at lower ranks but catch up and perform equally well, if not better, by the time of exit. This is ongoing work that my group at IIT Delhi is doing. And a previous study that I was put in charge at that time by the director of the institute to look at underperformance among students showed women outperformed men by a grade and a half at graduation. So this was a 13-year-old data set. And so despite the performance, which we have heard about in previous presentations of girls, they are considered less able, and their abilities to be STEM students continue to be questioned. They are simply not thought to have the same brilliance, the talent that is required to be a dominant STEM, male hegemonic upper caste STEM student, despite their superior performance, and their ability to do STEM continues to be doubted. There is a study in the US also, which also talks about classroom gender bias and gender ability stereotypes, where what the authors did was to ask students in the classroom to rank students as to who was their go-to person in order to understand, who people thought were good students. And it was found that both men and women always pointed to males as being the go-to persons, and this is despite the data, the objective data showing that the girls were performing way better than most of those boys. There was some difference, gender difference, in that girls tended to vote less in that manner or not unilaterally for boys. And this was across the sciences that this study was done. So it seems to be a very common thing that women outperform, overperform, work harder. In IIT, they're called maggus. We just heard from another presentation that they are considered to work hard and not have natural brilliance. It's the same thing that happens at the IITs also. So when we think of, what are the difficulties of inclusion, that's what I want to bring our focus back to. The girls are often called seat stealers, that, they are, thanks to the affirmative action scheme, they have stolen our seats. These seats are no longer available to us. And often people from disadvantaged castes, the imposter syndrome, are often told that you don't deserve to be here. And this is the kind, despite performance, despite, showing, entering and performing well, this is the kind of gender biases and the caste biases that continue to be reflected on campus. These are articulated and reinforced in everyday interactions made visible in the responses to gender affirmative action. So I have quotes here from the students, and one of the girls who is from a disadvantaged caste says, "Most boys think girls cannot do technical work. Girls are here only because they need less marks to get in." Now, when I said that all the girls are pushed into the female-only seats, they could be the top-ranking girls also. And there could be girls who needed that extra leg up in order to get into a better department or, get into a better IIT. But the idea is that, oh, you needed less marks to get in, and that's why you are here. So that putting down, which leads to a loss of confidence and many of the psychological attributes we have been discussing earlier. Another one, who's an upper caste girl in the top-ranked computer science department, says, "But nobody will ever reach out to me to clear a doubt or include me in a team because we have many projects that involve teams." So this is again a similar kind of an example where her brilliance is visible in the work she does, but she is rejected, isolated, not made one of the boys in some senses. And although affirmative action is addressing female isolation on campus, but on the other hand is the flip side, where you are still not accepted, the sense of belonging isn't being created. So it does address female isolation. So another girl says, "It's done wonders to make me feel at home. It is necessary to improve the gender ratio." And our interviews are very long, 1.5 hours, and the amazing way in which the students articulate their reasons for either being supportive of affirmative action or being conflicted or ambivalent about it is absolutely sophisticated in the way that they think about it. And a male from a disadvantaged category says, "Few girls attempt to get into engineering," going back to the class grade 6 syndrome. The scheme is good from that point of view. And we do see an effect on parents. Parents are now encouraging more daughters to apply for engineering and try to get into the IITs. Another girl from a very disadvantaged caste says, "I am studying, I have quota, I have a better chance." So they're very conscious, cognizant of the fact that affirmative action is giving them an opportunity to reach an institution which they would not in their wildest dreams have been able to reach. So it is also giving people initiative, to take hold of their own lives and pursue an academic career and pursue a better life than they have had before. So males all think that the better sex ratio improves social life on campus. They all said there are more girls to date. So they might have a different reason for having less resistance to gender-based affirmative action than most students have to caste-based affirmative action. So one of the things that I want to discuss is that there is a lot of ambivalence towards affirmative action. So I don't want to stress on the fact that people are either pro or anti. I think that's not the case anymore. Of course, there will always be some people, but what we realized in our interviews is that there is, as I said, a sophistication about thinking through the issue, but also an ambivalence. There's an ambivalence on the part of the beneficiaries of affirmative action, and there's an ambivalence even among some of the people who may think that they are losing out because of affirmative action. So there is a guilt that the beneficiaries feel about non-beneficiaries. So this girl says, "But I don't find it hurtful. Accusations of unfair advantage because the criticism is fair. I did get a 4,000 rank, when this guy got a much higher 800 rank. So the rank starts from 1, AIR, All India Rank 1. Everybody, it will be the picture will be in all the newspapers and everybody will know, and that rank will be that person's identity for the rest of their lives, whether they stay in India or whether they go to the US or Google or Microsoft. AIR1 will follow them. So unfortunately, in the case of the Dalit caste, rather than express the anxieties and the difficulties that they experience due to having come in on affirmative action, results in what I'm calling self-muting. And that's in the face of what I'm going to be discussing as a hegemonic meritocratic ideology that rules the entire engineering education system, especially the elite IITs. And I do want to focus on the elite IITs because they set the role models for the entire education system. Everyone's aspiring to be an IIT or in an IIT. It also leads to self-doubt in own capabilities. And the reason that I say this is because when you look at the students, they have all been toppers, topped in their own schools. And they have all done, been people who have been great at math. And they all do this combination called PCM, physics, chemistry, maths. That's the engineering stream in India, and biology is for lesser mortals. But they have developed, after coming into the IITs, they develop a self-doubt in their own capabilities. There is rampant stereotype threat experienced by women and disadvantaged castes. And however, as I noted, the resistance against gender affirmative action wanes over time. So when it first started and people are in their first year of the degree, there is a lot of resistance. But over a point of time, some people start acknowledging that maybe this was necessary. There was a big, stark gender gaps and things weren't happening on their own. So maybe this was something that was necessary. So how do we unpack? And this is the main thing I want to focus on and would also want others' help to think through this more. Unpacking the hegemonic ideology of merit. Most of us, there are a lot of studies in sociology. I haven't put down the names of the authors here who have discussed the issue of merit, especially in relation to engineering education. We know that merit is a cultural construct. And, especially when you look at it, how associated it is with the rank in this one exam, then one will see, how it is something that is completely constructed. Satish Deshpande, one of my colleagues, calls it merit as exceptional academic ability identified and certified through high-stake competitive exams. He says it's even more authoritative in how it categorizes and moves students. The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu wrote about this a long time ago when he also talked about the exam and how it separates in one stroke the people who are successful and the people who are not successful. And that kind of, has implications for the rest of their lives. What is peculiar in the IITs is that this understanding of merit as being defining a person's worth, academic worth, intellectual worth, etc., is internalized by all students, with rank being seen as a signifier of raw intelligence and providing social esteem. So, in a way, the exam divides people into the meritorious and the undeserving in some ways. And this could be graded. I'm not saying it's a binary, because people also look at, where you stand in the rank, which department did you get into, which IIT did you get into. So as I was mentioning that, people make very strategic decisions as to which IIT to join. Where will they pass out with the best rank or the best grades after joining also, even if they are people who are on the top of the heap. this whole thing of competition, the system is so highly competitive, and when you bring competition and merit together in this way, then the difficulties of inclusion, I think, become more and more. Let me know when. Should I wrap it up? I'm just finishing quickly. So students, faculty, and academic leaders fail to take cognizance of the hidden cultural capital accumulated by males and upper castes, which gives them what Bourdieu calls a head start. And here I just want to say that, what do we mean by cultural capital? For example, when we looked at our analysis of the performance of students, we found that the students who uniformly performed less better, their parents' educational backgrounds, their own background as somebody who might have taken the exam in the Hindi language, their own background as a parent was a farmer, all those kinds of things correlated with their performance in the IIT once they came in. But I'm saying that this cultural capital which the richer and the upper castes are coming with is misrecognized or not recognized. So people don't have a framework for understanding, why affirmative action should be there. What also is lacking are feminist gender equality or historical wrongs frameworks to understand the necessity of affirmative action. And I think this is especially true in technical institutions where people don't have much of social sciences or in philosophy or other kinds of things to be able to conceptualize and to understand how to locate the necessity of inclusion. So just my last slide, Violeta, sorry. Just to say that, addressing social bias, or biases, which we have been talking about, it's a social question, number one. Number two, it's a policy matter. I think that came up earlier also. It's also a matter of strategy, how to do it, in a way so that there isn't a backlash, how to also understand where the other person is coming from, which these students understand, which we sometimes who are so committed to the cause fail to understand. And what is also true is that neither gender nor caste are ontological or ideological. They emerge in interaction and are continuously reproduced. Hence, there are possibilities of interrupting, even though they might be rigid caste systems. And Nilanjana Dasgupta, who's a writer on women in STEM, says stereotype inoculation models, supportive experts and peers help change stereotypes. So I just wish to acknowledge my project, a 5-year project located in IIT Delhi, and all my colleagues who are part of what I presented today. And this is a quick look at how we have structured our work, which is, along the biography, let us see, or the life cycle of a female scientist. And we have a lot of studies, so you can go to the website and take a look at what we are doing. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking some
Thank you so much. Thank you.